Hey guys, Paul Salmon here. I'd like to talk to you today about a question that I frequently get from people will call. They're looking at buying a used helicopter and they'd like to know what a used Robinson R44 is worth. Well, let's attempt to answer that question. An R44 is worth what anybody is willing to pay you for it in the short term. But let's see if we can't narrow it down quite a bit more there. And I'm going to give you a range. I'm going to give you a low range and a high range, and I'll explain how we came to the determination of what's on the low side and what's on the high side. All right? So a Robinson helicopter, as when it comes out of the factory new, is good for 2,200 hours or 12 years, and at that point the aircraft needs to be refurbed. So the entire drivetrain gets refurbed. And so if you take what a brand new Robinson R44 costs, and I just looked one up on the configurator, had sort of middle of the road options on it. We'll take a look at this sheet here real quick. I'll just show you that it had basically a GPS comm in it, had put artificial horizon in it, and it had the usual complement of sort of towards the lower end. Now I didn't add a autopilot and a 750 and a G500H and all of that. If you do that, you can add the better part of $100,000 more to the aircraft just on what you're spending basically on the panel and avionics. Okay, so this is basically kind of a middle of the road aircraft, and you'll see that the aircraft figured up to be $592,000 and some change. Takes about another $3,000 to pay for your ferry insurance. So in my mind, the price of this aircraft should be a new Robinson aircraft, R44, Raven II, should be $595,000. Right? Now, if you subtract what the core value of a Raven II is worth, and a Raven II, when it's timed out and we've flown it for 2,200 hours, it's ready to be refurbed, what's it worth? About $130,000. And we'll talk more about when you start getting some of these machines that have nearly $100,000 or even more in options, what those options do to the core value of the aircraft. I think you'll be surprised that a lot of that you won't get most of your money back when you go to price it out as a core. So we'll look at that further here in just a minute. Now, if you took the value of the aircraft at $595,000 and subtracted 130 from it, you come up with $465,000 in the difference between what the aircraft is worth as a core and what it's worth or what it costs coming brand new off the line at Robinson. Okay, so if you take your value of $465,000 and divide it by 2,200 hours, that's the number of hours that the aircraft will you'll have on the aircraft when you time it out, you come up with a per hour rate of $211.36 per hour. All right. And remember, you have 2,200 hours that have to be flown off the aircraft in a 12-year period, and that averages out to be about 183.3 hours per year that the aircraft needs to be flown on average, so that you time the aircraft out in hours when it calendars out in years. If not, you can lose a significant amount of value. Let's say that you only put 1,800 hours on the aircraft over 12 years and there's 400 hours left on the aircraft. That's a heck of a lot of money to be losing. If you have 400 hours that's left on the aircraft when it times out at 12 years, 400 hours at $211.36 an hour is about a little over $84,000 in value that you're going to lose if you were to only fly the aircraft for 1,800 hours over 12 years. Let's look at the value of an aircraft that has exactly the right number of hours flown off of it. Let's say that you had an aircraft that was 6 years old and had 1,100 hours that the aircraft had flown, then it has 1,100 left on it. That's quite easy to figure the value. You simply take the core of 130,000, and then you take the number of hours left, 1,100 hours, multiplied times $211.36 per hour, and you come up with the value of the flight time being about $232,496 plus your 130,000 core gives you a value of $362,496. So that's for one that's 6 years old with 1,100 hours flown off of it, the exact number of hours that should have been flown off the aircraft in 6 years. So let's look at two different scenarios now. Let's say that the aircraft has, instead of having 6 years on it now, the aircraft has been flown for 9 years. Okay, let's take a look at that. So if the aircraft has been flown for 9 years, it has 3 years remaining before it hits the 12-year mark. And most people would use a formula that takes the number of hours that you would expect to fly the aircraft off and time it out, that being 183.3 hours per year. And since there's 3 years left on the aircraft, multiply that times 3, and you come up with 249.9 hours of flight time that should be left on a 9-year-old aircraft. Multiply that 549.9 hours times $211.36, and you come up with $116,226.86. Add to that the core value of $130,000, and that gives you $246,226.86, which is the low end. All right, that's what the aircraft would be worth if it was 9 years old, and you were figuring on the number of 183 hours per year remaining for the 3 years that are remaining on it. The value of the aircraft would be about that. So now let's look at the high end. The high end, again, if you were to multiply the number of hours, again, 1,100 times $211.36 per hour plus the core value, again gives you an aircraft worth, again, $362,496. So that would be the high end of this aircraft that has 1,100 hours remaining on it, but only 3 years. So the low end would be quite a bit lower, $246,226. And somewhere in between those two is the true value of what the aircraft is worth. Okay, so what about an aircraft, again, that has 1,100 hours flown off of it, and it has 1,100 hours remaining, but the aircraft is only 3 years old? Well, that's a pretty good deal if you can find one like that, because again, the value of it is again going to be much closer to that 1,100 times $211.36 plus your core value of $362,000. Now, the fact that it has 3 more years to fly those hours off does command a premium, but how much additional cost there is kind of a big raging debate. In my mind, you still only have 1,100 hours to fly off that aircraft. So a lot of people just go crazy and will give somebody, $60,000 or $70,000 over the figured $362,000, and that is just really stretching it out there. All right. So in my mind, again, the aircraft has 1,100 hours on it, and it may command an extra premium of say $20,000, maybe even $30,000 if you really needed an aircraft. Now, your ability to fly the aircraft and fly all those hours off also sort of determines on whether you're willing to pay that sort of money. If you own a flight school and you can reasonably expect to fly all those hours off and get every one of the hours off of it, then you're going to be a lot more likely to want to pay a fairly decent amount of money for the aircraft. If you're just a private pilot, most private individuals only fly 50 to 100 hours a year, and it's going to be tough to then get the value out of the aircraft, even over 9 years, to fly that 1,100 hours off of it. So it just depends on the situation that you're in. Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for just a minute. So we figured up the value of the aircraft that had 1,100 hours on it at 6 years of age at $362,000 and some change. If the aircraft was 3 years old and had 1,100 hours on it, again, probably worth, somebody ought to be reasonably expect to pay maybe an extra $20,000 on it for it. That's about all I would give anyway. How about you win an extra $75,000 on the aircraft, right? And you paid somewhere in the neighborhood of $440,000 for the aircraft because it's got 9 years left on it and all of that. Well, guess what? If you were to let's say you bought it today, paid $440,000 for it, and it's in the hangar tonight, and it's fully insured, your life is good, and you have a hangar fire, and the aircraft is completely destroyed. Well, you have 100% coverage. But guess what value the insurance company is going to want to use? They're not going to want to use the $440,000 that you just paid for it. They're going to want to price a much closer to the $362,000 if you figure it out on the hours remaining on the aircraft. So just a word of warning, if you go nuts and pay a significant premium over what the aircraft figures out on the hours left, you're kind of swinging in the wind. All right. If you're unable to fly the hours off of it, you're going to get dinged, and if the aircraft, God help you if you had an accident, but if the aircraft burned up in the hangar, you likely would get a significant amount less than what you paid for the aircraft. All right, that brings me to the next issue. You never, ever, ever want to underinsure an aircraft. Let's say that you have, let's make the math easier. Let's say you have a $300,000 helicopter, and you think, well, I could suffer a $100,000 loss if it crashed or whatever. I'm going to insure it for $200,000. And you insured your $300,000 helicopter for $200,000. And let's say that shortly afterwards you had a dynamic rollover, rolled the thing over, and did $99,000 worth of damage to the aircraft. How much is your insurance coverage, or how much is your insurance company going to pay for the damage? It's real easy to figure. They're not going to pay anything, because the first $100,000 you were self-insured. You had a $300,000 aircraft. You underinsured it by $100,000, so they figured you were self-insured for that first $100,000. Right? They'll be happy to keep the premium you paid for insurance, but you're going to see essentially nothing on the claim. Right? So you never, ever, never want to underinsure aircraft. In fact, what we do is we'll figure what the aircraft is worth, and we'll typically add 5% to the cost of to the value of the aircraft, overinsure it by $10,000 or $15,000. The amount of extra it costs to do that is almost nothing compared to the premium anyway, and you're not setting yourself up to basically get screwed if you significantly underinsured your aircraft. Now, if you went out and totaled the thing out, you'd get your $200,000, all right? But if you have a significant amount of damage to it, they're going to consider you self-insured for that first $100,000. So don't do it. You always have adequate amount of insurance on your aircraft. Okay, well, I hope you guys found that helpful. If you're in the market for buying a used R44 Raven II, if you guys like, just mention it in the comments, and I'll do the R44 Raven 1. R44 Raven 1, the core value is $100,000 or so instead of $130,000. And if you like, I'll go ahead and do the Raven 1 next, and also the R22. So, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next video.